Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Business First Creatives podcast. Y'all, I have made a new friend, and she is a new friend who deals with money, and that's the best kind. Crystalynn, welcome to the podcast. How are you this morning?
I am awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Crystalynn, I told them that you deal in money. So why don't you tell the listening audience who you are and what you do in order to set the stage for the conversation that we are about to have?
Okay. Well, my name is Crystalynn Shelton. I am a certified public accountant, and I'm also an advanced certified QuickBooks advisor. So I spend most of my days consulting with small business owners on how to manage their bookkeeping. So typically, my clients are the do it yourselfers, people who don't have the funds to hire a bookkeeper or don't want to hire a bookkeeper and they want to do the books themselves. And so I usually am working with my clients virtually because I have clients, all over, or I'll go to the office and train their, like maybe the business owner, maybe their staff person who's going to be managing the books. So spend a lot of time doing that. And then I also spend time writing. So my fifth book is going to be published next week. It's called Mastering QuickBooks 2024. And so I'm really excited about that.
So you write books about bookkeeping. there's gotta
I
be a
know.
joke in there
Hashtag
somewhere, girl.
nerd. It's okay.
Guys, before we hit record, I was telling Crystalynn how much I love numbers. I think all of you guys know I love numbers, but I still pay bookkeepers to do my books. And as I was telling her before we hit record, I do that because doing my own books does not make me money. And so all of that time that I would spend categorizing my expenses and my transactions, because I think y'all know I spend a lot of money. That's just not time that is generating revenue for my business. So,
Exactly.
first question, Crystalynn, is I know that we probably have a lot of people in the listening audience that aren't quite ready to commit to bookkeepers and they would like to go more that DIY route.
Mhm.
So, first of all, why do you recommend QuickBooks and do you recommend it for people who are just starting?
Excellent question. So, one of my favorite things about QuickBooks is I feel like it's the perfect software for a non accountant. And so, anyone, whether you have an accounting background or bookkeeping background, or whether you have no background in either one of those, you can learn how to use QuickBooks. I've used quite a few accounting software products, in my career. And it's one of the few that you can actually figure out without understanding what debits and credits are. And so that's really one of the main reasons that I like it. Second, it's been around over 20 plus years. So you can't find a bookkeeper or a tax preparer or someone who hasn't heard of QuickBooks. And so you always want to go with the software that's very well known because it's going to be easier to find people who know how to use that software. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would say that's the reason why I love QuickBooks. And then the other question was, do I recommend it if you're just starting out? So it
Yes.
really depends. Many people start out using Excel spreadsheets. I think we talked about how much you love spreadsheets, Coley. So
Not for
somebody else is a
bookkeeping.
nerd too.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so, so it really depends. A lot of people started with an Excel spreadsheet, which I think is fine, but they make the mistake of waiting until things get too out of control before they decide, oh, you know what? I need an accounting software like yesterday. So I think that it's ideal to start out with QuickBooks because they have like three plans that you can choose, or actually four plans that you can choose from. And so you can just do the starter plan. I think it's just best to start on a software so that you can implement a process and procedures, even if you don't have a lot of activity. That way, as
Mm-hmm.
things ramp up and you start getting busy, you've already got the system down. And so you won't be scrambling trying to convert your spreadsheets over to accounting software and all that jazz. So to answer your question, yes, I never think it's too early to start out using an accounting software.
Girl, that's how I feel about systems. It is never too early to put some systems into your business.
Exactly.
All right, Crystalynn. So you mentioned that there are three, and then you said four plans. But I want to say for the listening audience, because I made this mistake and I don't want anyone else to do the same. Do you have an opinion on using self employed QuickBooks?
Yes. I do. I'll try to keep it clean though. No. Um,
Okay.
no, self-employed QuickBooks is great for people who are, I would say, cash-based businesses who aren't going to grow for a number of years. But most of the small businesses that I deal with, self-employed, they're going to outgrow it too quickly. There's a lot of limitations to that version of the software, and it doesn't easily upgrade to the plans that I'm referring to for a small
Yeah.
business. So, self employed, I would just say, if you're interested in using that one, reach out to someone like myself and let's talk through what your business needs are to make sure it's going to sustain you for a long period of time. Because the last thing you want to do is get on the software and in 6 months you outgrow it, or even a year. Who wants to have to worry about upgrading their software, after being in business for 12 months? So tread
I did
lightly
that.
with the self-employed.
Yes.
That's my advice.
I was on self-employed for 1 year because I didn't know any better. I
Yeah.
loved it because it had the app and it had the mileage tracking, which now the other plans have mileage tracking, so that's not a
True.
reason to choose between them. But
Yeah.
when I got it, it was the first year that it had that and the other ones didn't have it.
That's
So
very
of course
true.
I jumped like feet first into self-employed. Started using it in my business, and the first thing that I noticed was I can't create categories for my expenses.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to use the IRS categories. Those don't make sense for my business. Like, I want to be able to say that this expense is related to my podcast.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, I realized the limitations within 3 months.
Yep.
But I was just stubborn.
Yeah.
So I kept on using it for almost a year. And then I finally converted into starter. And now I'm on whatever that middle tier is.
Yeah.
So guys, if you don't take anything from this conversation, please do not be like, okay, well, Crystalynn and Nicole said that I should go get QuickBooks and I'm going to get the self-employed version and go. Please don't do that.
Exactly. Please don't do that.
Please don't do that. So you're saying that QuickBooks is a good thing if someone wants to jump into their bookkeeping and get away from those Excel spreadsheets.
Mhm.
But I know that you've got 7 tips that you want to share with us today about getting control of your bookkeeping for this year, which when this airs, it's going to be 2024.
Yeah.
So let's dive into those tips. Where should we start?
Okay. So the first tip is don't commingle your personal and business funds. I see this a lot. And I will admit, when I first started my business, I had the money in one account, my personal and my business, because my business was a side hustle. And so I was using part of my paycheck, right, to fund the expenses for my business. So it didn't make sense to have a separate business account, or so I thought at the time. But it's really difficult when you have your personal and your business income in one account, and then you're paying all the expenses for your household and for your business as one account. It's just too convoluted, and you can't figure out if you're making money. You can't determine how much money you're spending on your business. So my number one recommendation is to set up a separate business checking and savings account, okay? Even if you don't have a lot of money coming in, right? And so if you are funding it with your personal funds, write yourself a check and deposit it in that business account to pay for what you need to. Okay. That's the cleanest way to do it and to stay out of trouble with the IRS. Okay. So that's tip number
We all
one.
want that. Mhm.
My second tip is really what we've already been talking about, which is start with an accounting software, in the beginning, and just go with the basics package. Like for a QuickBooks, it would be Simple Start. Start there, and I would set aside some money to hire someone to set it up for you if you're not comfortable with doing that. But if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you're very tech savvy, you could probably set up QuickBooks on your own. The book that I just mentioned that's coming out next week, Mastering QuickBooks 2024, walks you through step by step how to set up your QuickBooks, how to record your sales, how to record your expenses. It walks you through the whole gamut. And so you can absolutely do it yourself. Another tip I would recommend is to use as little cash as possible. And so the reason why I say that is because a lot of us have, issues with keeping track of your receipts, those paper receipts, right? They drive me crazy. Like, I just can't stand paper. And so the problem with paying cash is if you lose a receipt, you have no record that you made the purchase. Whereas if you use your debit card or your credit card, there's always a record because you have a bank statement or you have a credit card statement that shows proof that you've spent money for something. And so I would just say use as little cash as possible. My next thing, because it's my pet peeve, is go paperless. And so the nice thing about QuickBooks is you mentioned the app earlier, Coley. So you download that app on your iPad or on your phone. You can take a picture of receipts. It uploads to the software. As you know, it attempts to categorize it for you. And then later on, you can go in and review those things and record them on your books. But once you take that snapshot, you can toss that paper. You don't have to keep track of a whole bunch of receipts in this envelope or in your glove box and in your purse and all these different places that people stash receipts. And so definitely I recommend to go paperless as soon as you can.
I feel like you're talking to me. Are you talking to me? Like, are you like, Coley, I know for a fact that you have a whole purse full of receipts and every once in a while I toss them because I forget what they're for. So I love making all of my business purchases online whenever possible. I mean, if I'm buying a new hard drive or if I'm buying a new card for my camera, whatever it is, I love buying from Best Buy and Amazon and all those things because I can always go find that receipt. Like when my bookkeepers ask me what 40 things were, I don't know. Let me go look at Amazon and tell you what it was. But the one thing that I'm really guilty of, and you know what, Crystalynn, now I'm going to hear you in the back of my mind every time I eat out while I am on a business trip, is I always forget to keep the meal receipts. And so at the end of the year, like sometimes I'm like feeling guilty about, claiming my meals, even though there's a paper trail as to, I made it, but like I can't ever seem to keep track of the receipts. So I really do need to do a better job of taking pictures in the moment because the app will allow me to do it. So thank you, Crystalynn. That is what I have already gotten from this conversation. And I expect you to ask me in 6 months if I'm still doing it.
I will. I'll follow up, Coley.
Okay.
So yes, definitely. Another tip is if you're doing your own books, typically, I recommend that you go in and review your transactions on a weekly basis, if at all possible. So one of the things, and sorry, I kind of jumped ahead of that. Let me back up and talk about another tip I should have talked about earlier, which is connect your bank and credit card accounts to QuickBooks. Why? Because all of your deposits and withdrawals will automatically import into the software. And so instead of you sitting at a keyboard keying in all that information, it's automatically imported and you're literally just reviewing those things and categorize them as appropriate. So like, was this office supplies or gas or a meal at a restaurant, like you just said. So if you connect all those things, then you should only have to review them. And I would say weekly. I would say just put it on your calendar, set the time aside. Like I even have my calendar blocked for that bookkeeping time. And so for me, I make it fun. So I'll either treat myself to my favorite latte. Some people say, hey, I'll have a glass of champagne, whatever floats your boat. Okay. But make it something time. You look forward to, right? It's your money time.
I mean, Crystalynn, I still don't think I would look forward to it because, I spend a lot of money. I mean, so my bookkeepers are categorizing everything. But guys, I do want to say, even if you've hired bookkeepers, it is not a completely hands-off experience because sometimes they don't know what the transaction was. They can guess for some of them, but like often my Amazon purchases are like the number one thing that I feel like I have to justify to my bookkeepers. They're like, was this an office expense? Was this and maybe I'm the only one that's like reading that tone when they're asking me. But that's not their purpose. They are not mind readers. Unless you are also providing your bookkeepers with the actual receipt so that they can go through and actually categorize it, you are going to get questions.
You are.
And I will say that, at the beginning, they ask me a lot of questions. And now it's only like, 4 or 5 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially when I'm doing like business trips or something, and it's a vendor that they don't recognize.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, was this gas?
Right.
Was this a meal while you were on a business expense? Those kind of things. The other thing that I want to ask you, and I'm not sure if you're going to talk about it, but I want to jump in here because
Okay.
one of the things that I do is setting up CRM software for small business owners, right?
Okay.
Dubsado,
Yeah.
HoneyBook, those kinds of things. And so you said to connect your bank and your credit accounts. Are you going to talk about how we get our sales into QuickBooks? Because I feel like this is where a lot of people make a mistake in that they connect everything and then they have duplicated sales. Because if I connect my Dubsado account, which is where I actually collect the money, but people are being charged in Stripe, I should not connect Dubsado and Stripe because then all of those sales are coming in twice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that is an excellent point, Coley. Actually, I've had a client a few months ago who did exactly that. She connected Square and then she had connected her bank. And so the sales were being duplicated because she was pulling them in from Square and then she was pulling in those deposits, which were the deposits from the sales that she had made on Square. And so it's really important that you definitely connect your bank and credit cards without a doubt. But then when it comes to apps, so third-party apps, it's important to sit down and understand what information you want to pull from those apps because you don't need to pull everything and you can determine what information flows into QuickBooks. And so I think it's important if you're not familiar with how the app works or how it integrates with QuickBooks, set up a demo with the third party, i.e. Square or what's another one people use, Shopify, Stripe. Yeah. Set up a demo. Those people are happy to demonstrate the product because they want you to use it. So they will show you how the integration works and you can ask them all of your questions. But that's an excellent point. Don't just start connecting everything all willy-nilly because then you're going to be in a world of trouble. You're going to have to call somebody like me. Yes. And you're not going to be happy because you're going to have to pay me to clean it up.
Yes.
Definitely.
All right. So I want to give a quick recap because we've talked about a lot of tips and I want to make sure that none of them get lost before we move on to like the next part of the conversation. Yeah. So here are the tips that she has shared thus far. Keep your money separate. Y'all, don't be putting the personal and the business in the same account. Make sure that when the IRS comes knocking, that you can actually tell them which of your transactions were business because you have one place to send them to. The second piece of advice that she gave you is as soon as possible, go ahead and start with an accounting software. It is something that is going to grow with you. It is going to make your life easier. And QuickBooks is the standard, guys. There's a lot of other options that you can look at. But when it comes to picking one that like plays nicely with almost everything, let's just start with QuickBooks. The third thing is don't use cash. I mean, I don't even keep cash anymore, but if you are someone who keeps cash, definitely don't use it for your business expenses. The fourth thing that she said was go paperless, which guys, I really needed to hear that so that I can start taking pictures of my receipts. My bookkeepers will be very happy with me. The fifth tip that she shared was connect your bank accounts and your credit card so that everything related to those specific business transactions is coming into QuickBooks. So you know what, Crystalynn, I think I'm going to ask you a question now because it's a mistake that I've made and you'll be able to voice how what people should do if this happens. Every once in a while, my bookkeepers give me a note and ask me what something is. And I'm like, I don't recognize that. And I go look it up and it was an accidental personal purchase on one of my business accounts. And sometimes I'm like, I don't even understand how that happened because like, where was the credit card that anyways, if I accidentally make a personal purchase, either using my business checking or using my business credit card, is it the end of the world? What do I do?
It's not. And I've done that as well. And so what we'll typically do is have an account in QuickBooks called an owner draw or owner personal. And so you just put it to that account. The key is not to categorize something as a business expense if it's personal. So as long as you categorize it as a personal expense, you're fine. Yeah. Okay. You're fine. It's just like there's a difference between, something happened every now and then every month, the same thing. It's like, okay, is this really an accident though? That's
Well, in one case,
right.
it was actually happening every month because I had a Washington Post subscription. And no matter
Oh,
how many times I tried to remember to put it on a different credit card, like I
right.
don't know how it got entered in the first place. So I really wasn't trying to do anything nefarious.
Right.
I just like it took them reminding me 7 times. Coley, you really need to go change that credit card so that it can stop. And I mean,
Yeah.
eventually they just started automatically putting that transaction to my owner draw. And I mean, it was only
Yes.
like $4 a month. I mean, it wasn't
Exactly.
really a big deal. But
Exactly.
again, keep it clean. We want the personal over here and the business over here.
Yeah.
Okay, the last
Definitely.
tip that she shared with us, guys, is that you should be reviewing your transactions on a weekly basis. Now, I will admit, when I was doing my own bookkeeping, I was not doing that. And I shared with Crystalynn that every year, 2 days before taxes were due, I would lock myself in my office for like 12-hour days, guys, so that I could categorize all of my expenses and get them where they needed to be. Please don't be me. I don't know that I could still commit to doing it weekly. It sounds good. But like Crystalynn said, everybody needs to schedule this time on your calendar as like your CEO time. This is definitely one of your CEO tasks. Get in there, make sure that all of your expenses are categorized, because then at the end of the month, when you're doing your reconciling and you're looking at your profit and loss statement for the month,
Yep.
it is as accurate as possible.
Yeah. And so
All
let
right.
me just add to that. That was an excellent recap, Coley. And so
Okay.
you mentioned something about reconciling at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's be real. There's going to be times when you're not going to be able to look or categorize your items on a weekly basis. So if you can't do it weekly, at a minimum, do it monthly. And you want to schedule it after you've received all of your bank and credit card statements. So typically for me, that's like the second Saturday of the month is my, like you said, CEO time, because
Your
then,
me time.
yes, exactly. I have my latte, I have my statements, I have, and I can sit there, categorize what hasn't been categorized. Then I review my P&L for the previous month because I want to see, where I made money, how much money did I spend, what did I spend my money on. It's really important to be in tune to that kind of thing. And you want to do it monthly because there are mistakes that can happen all the time. I mean, I don't know if this has happened to you, Cody, but there's been times, multiple times, where someone has gotten a hold of my credit card number. The card will be in my wallet,
Mm-hmm.
but my card's been used at places that I never, you know, was. And so I would contact my bank. And as you probably know, this process is they automatically go ahead and give you the credit, and then they do an investigation, and then they find out, oh, okay, yeah, you're telling the truth, and
Mm-hmm.
take care of it. But there's a certain period of time where that can pass, and they won't allow you to dispute any charges.
Yes.
And so that's another reason why you really want to stay on top of reviewing your transactions, because it happens all the time. Fraud is a real thing.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I just feel like I'm not going to tell y'all what my credit limit is, but it is really large on my
Mm-hmm.
business stuff.
Yeah.
And so if you are someone who is not paying attention, I mean, if someone charged $300 or $400, I probably wouldn't notice in
Exactly.
the grand scheme of things of all of the other things that I'm actually legitimately charging for my business. So
Mm-hmm.
it is really important on a monthly basis that you just look at that statement
Yeah.
and be like, oh, okay, at a glance, I did all those things, even if you haven't categorized them yet. But categorizing your expenses is like that extra layer to
Yeah.
make sure that there is no fraud, to make sure that the things that you are actually paying for as your business are the things that you truly charged.
Right.
Because I know personally, when my credit card tends to get stolen is at the gas stations,
Me too.
which I've just started tapping now. Instead of swiping, I'm tapping. If you have,
Exactly.
yeah, but like
Yep.
I consciously have to think about that when I'm out of town for business and I have rented a car,
Mm-hmm.
because if I'm going to get the gas, I want to make sure that in my mind, okay, no, I swiped my credit card for gas.
Mm-hmm.
Like I need to just make sure that I'm checking it, for the next week or whatever,
Yeah.
to make sure that no one has gotten a hold of my credit, because those thieves are everywhere.
They are everywhere. And the other tip that I would give, and everybody can do this today, is most banks allow you to receive an alert over a certain dollar amount. So for all my bank accounts, I have an alert that says any charges that are $100 or more, I want a text and an email. And
Okay.
I get those alerts so that I can quickly look at my phone and say, oh, yep, that was me. And then if it's something that wasn't me or I don't recognize, I contact my bank right away. And so I definitely recommend you do that as well. I mean, we work hard for our money, so you need to make
We
sure,
do.
you know.
Hmm. I want to make sure that I'm keeping it. And I don't know if
Hmm.
this is specific to Bank of America, everyone, because I don't have a business credit card with Bank of America. I do have a personal one, but
Yeah.
I have that particular card set up to where it sends me an email every time something is charged and it's not my physical card. So every time it's used for like an
Mm.
auto charge online, or every time I'm buying something from
Yeah.
like an online store, I get an email that says, your credit card was used and it was not present. It gives me the name of the vendor and it gives me the amount of money. I mean,
Exactly.
that's just another way that I make sure personally someone isn't running off with my credit cards, especially the ones that I don't use as often. Like, I want to
Right.
make sure that no one is racking up
Yeah.
debt while I'm not paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly the alert that I have set up, except I do it for all transactions. And I have Bank of America as well. So, yep.
Hmm. Nice. All right. So I feel like those tips that you gave us are all amazing, but I know that some people are probably still just a little apprehensive about leaving their spreadsheets or whatever
Yeah.
system they have. Because I'm going to admit, I know a lot of people that don't even have spreadsheets. It hurts my heart to admit that. But, I don't know what they're doing for their bookkeeping. I
Right.
legitimately don't want to know. But if they are listening to our conversation and they're like, you know what, I think I want to give QuickBooks a chance. As you've already said, simple start is where everybody should go. And I mean, a majority of the time, you can get an initial discount on your first
Hmm.
year, especially if you're getting it through a bookkeeper, a CPA,
Yep.
someone who has that offer.
Yep.
But one thing that I wanted to ask you is, how hard is it to learn QuickBooks?
Hmm.
And where is it that we can go for like resources in order to set it up ourselves, or at least attempt to set it up ourselves if we want to go the DIY route?
Yeah, great question. So, first of all, I think books is extremely easy to learn how to use. But the key is that you have the right resources so it teaches you the proper way to use it. I
Hmm.
have tons of clients who have purchased it, gone in there, figured things out on their own, and I admire that, but it's not the best way to go about it. So, I mentioned my book, Mastering QuickBooks 2024. That is
And we will have a link in the show notes.
that is the budget friendly way to go, right? The book's probably 29, 30 bucks on Amazon. And it teaches you step by step how to set your books up and really how to record those basic transactions in QuickBooks. That's like the first resource. The second resource that I have is a self paced course. It's called QuickBooks Bootcamp Basic Training. And you can get that on my website. It's www.crystallynshelton.com /podcasts for your
Okay.
audience. And so that course is me teaching you how to set up QuickBooks and use it properly. So you
Nice.
literally can pause the video and do what I show you and play it. And so it's really nice for people who are visual and don't
Hmm.
necessarily want to pick up a book to do it, but they're like, oh, Kristen's going to teach me? Yeah, that's what I want. My personal QuickBooks trainer. So
Ah,
that's what the
yes.
course is. So those are really the two main resources that I recommend. The other thing I was going to say is there's a test drive. Like if you're like, oh, I'm just curious how QuickBooks works. I don't know if, what is the platform like? What does it look like? You can actually Google QuickBooks Online Test Drive. And you don't even have to provide any information. It's just a confirmation that you're not a robot. And then it lets you into a sample QuickBooks file that you
Hmm.
can sort of click around and just check it out. If you're just curious about it, then that's a good resource as well. But all new clients, I meet with them for 30 minutes, complimentary consultation, to talk to them about their business and what they need so that we can sort of figure out what the best plan is for them. So I absolutely have that available as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to figure out if you are ready for bookkeeping,
Yeah.
because Like the thing is, it's hard for people to give you a standard. Like, oh, when you're making $50,000, that's when you need bookkeeper, or
Exactly.
when you have like 20 sales a month. That it's not that cut and dry.
It
Like
isn't.
sometimes you just need to sit down with someone and tell them all about your business and be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so am I ready for bookkeeping? Like,
Yeah.
and the answer is usually probably going to be yes, like every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But
Exactly.
the level
The
of bookkeeping
level.
that you
Yeah.
need can be very different.
Absolutely. Yep. I totally agree.
All right. So I think before we end this conversation, I do want to ask you, just because I'm curious, because
Mm-hmm.
I know that I see like the same mistakes when I'm setting up people's CRMs over and over again. Is
Mm-hmm.
there anything that you think that people do wrong when they're trying to DIY their QuickBooks that you could like put up a red flag and be like, please don't do this?
I would say a common mistake that I see is a lot of people aren't familiar with the chart of accounts, especially if you're
Hmm.
not an accountant. And so, what I see a lot is people who aren't accountants will set up their vendors in the chart of accounts list. So, for example, the chart of accounts is, for those who aren't familiar with that term, it's just categories that are set up so that you can keep track of all of your business income and expenses. So, for example, office supplies is a account, i.e., category. And so basically, in QuickBooks with the chart of accounts, you want to keep that account information generic, right? So you don't want to put like Office Depot or Target, right? I've seen that. You don't want to put that in your chart of accounts because whatever shows up on your chart of accounts will show up on that financial statement. You don't want to see
Hmm.
Target or office supplies on your P&L. That goes on another report called vendor expenses, right? And so
Yes.
I would just say the chart of accounts needs to be generic so that way, whether you purchase office supplies from Target or Office Depot, all of those purchases go to one account called office supplies, which appears on your P&L. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So that's a real common one, I think. And it's just because no one's explained to them what that purpose of that chart of accounts is, basically.
No, I love that. And now you've given me the proper term. So earlier in this conversation, when I was talking about the fact that self-employed QuickBooks won't let you create your expense, that's what I was actually talking about was your chart of counts.
Mm-hmm.
I personally in my business want to see what kind of expenses are directly attributable to this podcast, separate
Yes.
from what's attributable to like my revenue generating activities like client work and my course sales and all of those things. And I will
Exactly.
just add, you said to make sure that you're not naming your vendors in your chart of accounts.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say don't go crazy and make a chart of account label for like every single thing that you can
Whew.
think of, because when it
Yeah.
comes to doing your taxes, the IRS already has these chart of account labels,
Yeah.
and then you can always put, custom ones on your pages and all that, but like you don't want there to be 4 pages
Exactly.
for your chart of
Oh
accounts
my
listing every
gosh.
single thing. So I mean, the best thing that I've ever done is making sure that I understand
Mm-hmm.
what is going into each of those, because like
Yeah.
advertising expenses, I think that's the one that I always have the hardest time with,
Mm-hmm.
because like you can or cannot put your website
Yeah.
expenses into that category depending on how you think about it. So again, guys, chart of accounts is a very dense subject. And I feel like if I hadn't actually spoken to professionals at some point,
Yeah.
I would have ended up with a chart of accounts that was 4 pages long, because I would have wanted to know where every little bit of my money is going. And perhaps the scariest one is educational expenses. That's the one. There's so much in there, Crystalynn. Like
Oh
you know
gosh.
what? We don't need to talk about that. We're
Exactly.
going to end this podcast episode on a good note. So you have already
Mm.
mentioned that everyone will be able to find out more information about you by going to crystallynshelton.com/podcast. But where can they find you if you are active on your social media accounts?
Yes. So on social media, I am at Crystalynn Shelton. So it's CrystallynnShelton. So that's all the platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, IG, and then Twitter, it's at Crystalynn Pens, Pens.
Okay. Well, everyone, I hope that this conversation has made you feel like, in case you weren't already on top of your bookkeeping and you didn't have a plan, like now you can move forward in 2024 with some amazing bookkeeping so that in December, when you're trying to close out your books for the year, you won't be a anxious puddle on the floor. Crystalynn, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. It was amazing.
Thanks so much, Coley. I had so much fun. Thanks again.
All right, everyone. That's it for this episode. See you next time.